I'm Victoria Galea.
Hi, I'm Mike Schreiner.
And today we're talking about the Green Party of Ontario's fight for helping Canadians battle COVID-19 and all the different green issues that we've been trying to champion that we can have a better insight to now with COVID. Mike, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. My viewers have heard a lot of great tidbits about you as we are currently filming the leadership series for the Green Party of Canada, and I hold them to a much higher bar than the Green Party of Ontario because you guys do such great work that I'm really pushing them to make the change for structural change and what I hope to see from a leader because we have such a great leader here in Ontario. For those of you who don't know, Mike Schreiner is our leader for the Green Party of Ontario, and he's also the elected Green MPP for Guelph. So it really is great to have you on the podcast.
Well, thanks for the kind words, and I think you are fantastic. Did a fantastic job in the federal election, so I'm looking forward to you running again in the future, either for the GPO or the GPC, or both.
Yeah, but why not both, right? I'll take it. Right now Canadians are facing a really hard time with really high unemployment rates, and something that the Greens have talked about for a long time is guaranteed livable income. CERB, the Canadian Emergency Relief Fund, has given us an insight into what this might look like. Can you tell us the Green Party of Ontario's stance on a guaranteed livable income and what changes we hope to see within the government?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly hoping that the CERB really opens a conversation to bringing in a permanent guaranteed livable income. It was a real honor. I co-wrote an op-ed that was in the Toronto Star with the interim leader of the Green Party of Canada, Joanne Roberts, advocating for a guaranteed livable income. And it's something I supported prior to the pandemic, but I think the COVID crisis has really illustrated why it is so important to have a basic income across Canada, and especially obviously in Ontario. I was really proud. The Green Party of Ontario in the last provincial election was, I believe, the first political party that actually put forward a platform with a fully costed basic income program in the platform. And, you know, some of the reasons I support it is I think there's a floor that no one should go below. And we need basic income security for people. And I think doing it through a guaranteed livable income is the most efficient and effective way of delivering that program. I think we've seen some of the inefficiencies of all the adjustments the federal government had to make, and good of them to listen to people as they raised concerns with the CERB. But I think, you know, the flaws we saw in the employment insurance system, and then all the adjustments that had to be made with CERB, you know, really shows for me the importance of having a basic income. And we had a pilot project in Ontario, and the preliminary results from the McMaster study on it showed that, you know, more people got jobs and kept their jobs. People improved their housing situation, their mental health, their physical health. For those people who were not working, most of them went back and either went to college or university or some sort of retraining program so they could get a better, higher paying job, or they started their own business. So according to that study, it was a huge success. And that's the kind of program I'd like to see made permanent as we recover from the COVID crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I also see a big issue online that people are discussing because we kind of have CERB as an example what this might look like is a guaranteed livable income versus a universal basic income. I think it's really important that we have this differentiation within the party that I don't see other parties talking about, because it's not that everyone needs to have the same baseline, but in order to bring equality and equity, we need to have a guaranteed livable income to make sure everyone is able to have a living wage. So my next question is, we are concerned currently with the support for small businesses, and unfortunately, before relief came in from the government, some small businesses here and even in Hamilton had to close their doors. Can you tell us about the Green Party of Ontario's stance on small business relief?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was just having this discussion with the finance minister at our first virtual online committee meeting not too long ago, just before us recording this podcast. And I was really pushing the minister to bring in a ban on commercial evictions. The bottom line is over half of Ontario small businesses say that they're not able to pay their rent, and almost half of them are saying that their landlord is not going to participate in the commercial emergency relief program for commercial rent. And so what businesses are asking of the government is to bring in a temporary ban on commercial evictions for any small business that was in good standing when the crisis started. I think it's a reasonable ask. I mean, think about just the vibrancy and vitality of our communities and our neighborhoods. Small businesses play a vital role in that regard. And we don't want our downtowns and our neighborhoods to become ghost towns because we lose our small businesses. Also, a lot of people are talking about this being a she-cession, that the economic downturn is disproportionately affecting women. Many of those women work for in the retail and hospitality sector, being directly employed by small businesses. I've been also advocating that we should have a funding program in place to support small businesses in terms of paying their rent and utilities, but also helping them be able to invest in the things that they're going to need to reopen safely. So is that PPE, or is it plexiglass, or is it expanding their operations, like in the case of a restaurant, to be able to still maintain the viability of their business while still respecting physical distancing and public health measures. So having those kinds of supports in place, I think, are critically important. Unfortunately, the provincial government has not been as supportive of businesses as I actually thought they would be, given that, Doug Ford, one of his favorite words is open for business. Well, I want Ontario to be able to reopen for business. And if we don't provide small businesses with the supports they need, many of them will not reopen.
Exactly. And even though our license plates may no longer say that, it's still really important to make sure small businesses are supported. Speaking of which, with rent being due, we are filming on June 1st of the month, and we still have not seen the type of rent relief that other countries have been providing. Can you share your thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I've been advocating for a rent relief program for both residential tenants, so individuals and families struggling to pay the rent, and also which would also support landlords as well. There's a number of small landlords in particular that if they're not receiving rent, then they can't pay their expenses, whether it's their mortgage or utilities or building maintenance or whatever. And likewise, on the commercial side, I've been advocating for rent relief as well for small businesses that have been, really impacted by the COVID crisis. And again, we want people to have a roof over their head. We had a housing affordability crisis prior to COVID. The COVID crisis has only made that situation worse. And so, I've been disappointed the government hasn't delivered on a program like that. And likewise, small businesses employ, the majority of Ontarians work for a small business. We know how vital small businesses are to the vibrancy and vitality of our downtowns. And by the way, a number of nonprofit and social enterprise organizations also require rent relief as well and play a vital role in caring for people in our community and delivering services in our community that might not otherwise be delivered. And so having a rent relief program, that supports individuals and families, supports small businesses and nonprofits, I think is vital.
Absolutely. And another small business that people aren't really talking about is local farms. So there's a big concern right now, especially with the fact that a lot of our meat industry comes from only a handful of small farms across the country and in Ontario. So whether it's a local farm or concerns over border closures on what are we looking at for the import of our food supply chain, a lot of people are worried in general about food security. Where's the Green Party of Ontario standing right now with that issue?
Yeah, well, I always believe there's two sides to the food security standpoint. One is can we grow enough food to feed ourselves? And also, do people have enough income to be able to afford to access healthy local food? And I'm concerned on both sides. And, I'll never forget that day when Donald Trump basically said, hey, we're going to close the border to PPE shipments, the N95 mask to Canada. And, I'll give Premier Ford credit. He's a big Donald Trump fan, but he actually spoke against the U.S. president making that move. And it just hit me that, I don't think a lot of Canadians realize that if the border shut down to food shipments, we only have about 3 days worth of fresh food in Ontario. And we're very overly dependent on U.S. imports of fresh fruits and vegetables in particular. And so supporting local farmers, supporting local food infrastructure. We've lost a lot of our small and medium-sized food processors. So whether that's canning or freezing when it comes to fruit and vegetables. So rebuilding that food infrastructure so we're self-sufficient. A country that can't feed itself is just as insecure as a country that cannot defend itself. But also, as you mentioned, particularly in processing of animal proteins, just a handful of multinational corporations now do most of the processing, which raises significant animal welfare concerns, but also makes our supply chains incredibly vulnerable. And we've seen the COVID outbreaks, particularly in plants in Alberta and Quebec, but we also had a pretty significant outbreak in a processing plant in Brampton. And, that threatens, our supply to grocery store shelves, but also the farmers who rely on those processors. So rebuilding that processing capacity to support local farmers and to get local food to people. And then one of the reasons I didn't mention around why a guaranteed livable income is so important is one of the things, so people have the money to be able to buy healthy local food. Far too many people have to access food through food banks. Too much of that food is highly processed and not fresh fruits and vegetables. And so we need to increase people's income so they can afford to buy healthy local food. And then also having the ability to grow their own, which was one of the reasons I launched a campaign to open community gardens, which were initially closed under the province's emergency orders. And thanks to the thousands and thousands of Ontarians who signed our petition and pushed the Premier to do the right thing, and to the Premier's credit, he listened and reopened the community gardens, because so many individuals and families use those community gardens to grow food for themselves, but also grow food for food banks. Because, as much as I don't want to see people have to go to food banks, if they are forced to go to food banks, I want to make sure there's some fresh, healthy, local fruits and vegetables there as well. So it's not just highly processed foods.
Absolutely. It's so important because we've seen also huge influx of victory gardens coming back. A lot of people,
Yes.
Seeds flew off the shelf this year. We're really concerned, and going back to also the food supply chain, but people wanting to secure their own food as well. So seeing you guys champion that issue of opening community gardens was something that was really important to me. I've helped build community gardens and have worked with a lot of them, so that was a really important issue. For those of you that don't know, please feel free to go over to the Green Party of Ontario website. They're always having a great petition and really informative infographics and other information, a range of issues that are going on in Ontario that are really important. So I urge you to check out the website. And my last question for you today relating to COVID is our healthcare system. Our healthcare workers are on the front lines battling COVID-19 every day. And I just want to know the Green Party of Ontario stance of how they're doing with that relationship of the Ford government, and what are the changes that we still haven't seen that we've been demanding for change.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things is just to reverse the cutbacks in our healthcare system that came out in last year's budget. So the cuts to public health, the cuts to hospital capacity, the cuts to long-term care. We've just seen what an awful tragedy we've seen in long-term care. And so part of the government's COVID response was to restore some of that funding. that was previously cut. But, from my perspective, the COVID response should have been bumping things up. So we were properly prepared, not reversing the cuts from the previous year. Yeah. And so I don't believe we were adequately prepared, particularly in public health and long-term care. We're still not up to the levels of capacity we need to be in terms of testing and contact tracing. And I think a lot of that is related to the cutbacks in public health. I've been a long-time advocate of increasing funding for public health because I think that actually saves us money in the long term. Like, the more we can do to prevent illness and promote health, the better. And so it's unfortunate that it's taken this COVID crisis to wake the government up to what a vital role public health plays in our society. And then in the long-term care sector, it just breaks my heart what is happening. And it just really exposes the need to care for our elders with the dignity they deserve. And some people have been saying we need more regulations in long-term care. What we need are minimum standards of care. The long-term care sector is actually very highly regulated, but it's missing some critical investments in increasing the minimum standard of care to at least 4 hours a day, increasing the number of registered nurses in our long-term care homes so people receive the quality of care they deserve, and in ensuring those workers are paid a living wage and are guaranteed full-time work with benefits. I mean, one of the big challenges in the outbreak was that so many workers are working in 2, 3 or more facilities, and they unfortunately were transmitting the disease from facility to facility because they were not being adequately paid. And I'm hoping that I'm pushing for a public inquiry into long-term care, but I hope it's broadened to look at the way in which we care for elders in general. So looking at home care, looking at innovations in things like co-housing, looking at how do we, improve the standards of care in our long-term care homes and nursing homes. All that is going to be vitally important as we learn the unfortunate lessons from the COVID tragedy in our long-term care homes.
Absolutely. There's so many different levels to our healthcare system, from PSWs to long-term care and retirement homes. It's just a tragedy to see what's going on, and they're being heavily disproportionately impacted by the COVID crisis. And to see the military come in and also say there's some very troubling and concerning things here is very concerning as well. So there's a lot to do. Hopefully, we'll see as we're starting to come back down, and hopefully we won't hit a second wave too hard if we do have to have it. I know some other countries are in their second wave now. So we'll see what plays out with the reopening and the nicer weather. This is Canada, so summer, everyone loses their minds. So hopefully no one's swarming the beaches, but obviously with Trinity Park in Toronto, that was a very concerning sight as well. So everyone, stay safe out there. We are still in a pandemic, and don't forget to wear your mask when you go out. So Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Nice to join you. And yes, I agree. Everyone, be safe and be well.
Wash your hands, everybody. All right, to my viewers, don't forget, like and subscribe, and check out the leadership series currently being filmed on the channel right now. Have a great day.